we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now. Got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K,
S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K, S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now. Got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K,
S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur.
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Leur 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TV. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast on this August 28th. Thank you so much for watching on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. And of course, as always, the Sick Podcast brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America. My friends, Mike Cinquino, Sean Gerard, David Grassi, and the entire staff, Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. Also brought to you in part by Bittt at Tibi and my buddy Aldo Geloso and Ted Farace, with a shout out to Fred Sartor. Bittt TV launched their new Ultra Lager, a refreshing thirst-quenching beer, perfect for the hot summer days with only 90 calories, 2 grams of carbs, 4% ABV per can, available in a pack of 6 to 12 in grocery stores all around the province of Quebec. Ultra light, ultra refreshing. Also brought to you in part by Playground. And a shout out to my buddy Danny with the yellow shirt. Step into the world-renowned poker experience at Playground, where free food and drinks at cash game tables, a bad beat jackpot that's over $2.1 million. Weekly promotions, daily tournaments, unmatched customer service awaits you. Why play anywhere else? Located just minutes from downtown Montreal, across the Mercier Bridge. Playground. Without further ado, I bring in, he is a former National Hockey League general manager. He has been in scouting for the longest time. He's TSN's hockey analyst and director of scouting. And he's a very dear friend of mine, even though he never called me for supper when I was in Vegas. But that's because everyone else wanted to have supper with him. Craig Budden, how are you?
Now, I have to defend myself here. You were pretty busy. You were pretty busy in Vegas, Tony. You were doing shows at night. It was hotter. It was really hot. And you had some wonderful episodes from Vegas. So, it gets to be a little bit busy. I'm going to be in Montreal early in October, very early in October, maybe on the first day of October.
Oh, so really?
We very well, we're going to find time to break bread. I promise you.
I hope so. Hey, listen, I'll be doing a radio show until noon, and I'll be available right after that. So if you can make the time, I'm going to be doing a TV show, collaboration on TV at around 5:30 p.m. So I'm going to tell you this, between noon and 4 p.m. or so, I have a window. So I'm hoping you can get me in there. I know how important and how busy you are.
Well, on October 2nd, which is a Wednesday, well, I got the first. The Canadiens are playing an exhibition game that night against Ottawa. Then you have the next day. Who knows? We'll find time. We're going to make time.
I'd love to take you out to the restaurant, and I'd love to bring Agnello so he can pay. All right, okay.
That's funny.
You like Camus?
Oh, yeah.
I love Camus.
Oh, yeah. It's great.
I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not a big wine drinker, so I'll drink socially, and, I don't have a bottle of wine at home to have with my wife doesn't drink, so we won't have wine at supper. But if I'm going to go to the restaurant, I mean, it's someone's going to order Camus, I'm not going to shy away from it. I think it's a fantastic bottle of wine. But anyway.
It is.
Yeah. All right. Look, yesterday was a fantastic day for me because I had a chance, of course, to have a conversation that lasted 23 or 24 minutes with Montreal Canadiens general manager Kent Hughes. It took place on my radio show called Le Forum on BPM Sports, Montreal's only French all-sports radio station, 91.9 on your FM dial, bpmsports.ca. If you want to listen via the internet, check out their YouTube channel and subscribe to it if you haven't already. And thank you for watching. All right, okay. And there's a lot of things that came up. And, there's some things where he didn't want to show his hand, and there's just some things he was willing to. There's a term in English, which is, of course, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the line of Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slavkovsky is not broken. So Kent Hughes talked about that line and what possibly can be, or who will be centering the second line. Let's hear from Kent Hughes.
Je pense qu'avec les joueurs qu'on a présentement, il y a une certaine flexibilité pour nos coachs dans la manière qu'ils vont construire les lignes. On a vu un gars comme Kirby qui a joué à l'aile au début, sa première année, mais qui a vraiment commencé à venir dans son jeu quand il a été remis au centre. J'imagine qu'il va commencer avec la ligne à Slavkovsky, Suzuki et Caulfield, vu qu'ils ont bien terminé la saison.
All right. Our coaches will have a lot of flexibility in the lines because, of course, there's a lot of players who are center but can also play the wing. Nick Suzuki is a center. Kirby Dach is a center who can play the wing. Alex Newhook is a center who can play the wing. List goes on and on. He said, but I would imagine that the way they ended the season, Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slavkovsky will start together. And Kirby Dach has shown that he's better at center than he is on the wing, so he'll be centering the other line. So now I think it's safe to say that based on that, Patrick Laine will start the season alongside Dach. So now the big question is who's going to be the number 6 in the top 6. So we talked about it all morning on my radio show. I know I was on with Jimmy Murphy and Pierre Maguire on the eye test. And we discussed the different possibilities as well. I haven't had a chance to talk to you about it, so here's my chance. What do you think?
Well, let me go back to what Kent said about Kirby Dach. I think Kirby operates really well in the middle of the ice. I think somebody with his talent, with his skating ability, when you're on the wing now, and I know the game is more open and more free than it once was, but now he's now pushed closer to the boards and further away from the middle of the ice. I think that takes away from Kirby Dach's strengths and the way he can dictate the game in the middle of the ice with his length, with his skill, with his skating. I like Kirby in the middle, and I want to see him in the middle. And I think for Martin St. Louis, if you have a center ice of Suzuki and Dach 1-2 in your top 2, I think that's a really good place to start. Patrick Laine has shown that he can play on the left wing. And, it's interesting. Maybe you put Laine, the flexibility that Kent talks about. Maybe you have Laine play the left wing at some point. Maybe Kirby plays on the right wing, and then you have Alex Newhook in the middle. Alex played really, really well, I thought, after he came back from his injury, back in the middle of the ice. Obviously Sean Monahan had moved along, and then Alex had more room to roam. So it's interesting. Could Alex be your third line center? I think that there's lots of opportunities here.
Yeah.
Josh Anderson has played on the left wing. I don't know if that's the best place for him, but he can skate off that wing. And I'm going to go back to the word that Kent used, flexibility.
Yeah.
Coaches love flexibility. When they're looking at their lineup and they're going, oh boy, he's scaled up a little too high, or that's not the right fit for a player. You can move players around to I don't want to say maximize, but to put them in better positions for success and to play to their abilities. I'm going to say this. Don't rule out Joshua Waugh playing on the left wing with Kirby Dach and Patrick Laine. Don't rule them out. You know what I think of Joshua Waugh.
Yeah.
And I think that he's a really good player that's got lots of room to grow. And I think we saw it last year. I think we could see it again this year. And given an opportunity to play with really good players, Joshua Waugh has always been able to fit in nicely and enhance what they do and not lose anything in his game.
So I'm going to tell you what I told Pierre Maguire and Jimmy Murphy, and that is, I can see pluses and minuses for almost every player and make a case for them or against them playing with Kirby Dach. So, for example, Josh Anderson, the minus, it would give you 3 right-handed shots on the same line. The plus, I think it could be a big, strong, heavy line that could dominate the boards and dominate the cycle. A 6'3" Anderson, a 6'4" Doc, and a 6'5" Liney. Yoel Armia, the positives. A player in his last year of his contract could definitely be put in a situation to score goals, can increase his value. Also a fellow Finn, and maybe he'll hit it off with Liney. The minuses would also make 3 right-handed shots. Joshua Roy, the pluses, probably the one with the most offensive instincts out of everyone else, who obviously has the skill level to be able to play alongside those guys. The minuses, maybe not enough experience and maybe actually probably too much pressure on a young player. The same thing could probably be said for Barre Boulet. Alex Newhook, I think, might be the safest pick because here's a guy who can help Kirby Dach out with faceoffs if he's struggling and takes some. Here's a guy who can play center and can play wing. Here's a guy who's a left-handed shot. And here's a guy who has the speed, who will be able to come back and cover some areas of the ice that maybe Liney won't be covering should he be taking some offensive liberties. You talked about Alex Newhook centering a third line. I could see that, but I could also see him on the wing on the second line, and I could see Dvorak centering the third line.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things with Christian is that Christian has run into injury problems and injury challenges, and that certainly is going to inhibit any player, and it certainly has inhibited the effectiveness of Christian Dvorak. But when you look at, again, I'm going to use Kent's word, flexibility. All the things you talked about are legitimate. But and just let me just use this scenario. So you're playing in a game and you're going, okay, listen, we're going to have Newhook, and we're going to have Newhook play with Christian Dvorak. Newhook plays on the wing, Christian Dvorak, and then you have Anderson, you have Joshua Roy. Well, depending on how the game's going, well, now you can say, well, maybe it's a little bit too rich this game for Joshua Roy up there. So now you can move You can move Alex Newhook up there, and play there. Then you can swing Armia into a spot. Those abilities for a coach to use his players interchangeably in different spots, I think every coach would love to have that. And when you're constructing your roster like Kent has done with the Montreal Canadiens, I really believe now this is now the genesis of getting your team harder to play against. Harder to play against doesn't mean throwing your weight around. Harder to play against means leaving your opposing coach up the night before thinking about how he's going to match up, thinking about during a game about certain situations that he doesn't want to get himself into. If you don't have that flexibility with players in your roster, you're not really making your team hard to play against. Kent has now given Marty and the coaching staff more players to be able to use in different situations. And that's how you become a stronger, harder team to play against. And I think Kent has done a really nice job in that regard.
In previous episodes, Pierre Maguire said that the way he would probably use Lane Hutson early on in his NHL career is 11 forwards, 7D, bring Lane along very, very gradually, make sure that he gets a lot of power play minutes and gets on all the power plays, not trying to expose him defensively. And so I asked Kent Hughes about that. Let's hear Kent Hughes on Lane Hutson.
Bon, l'idée, vu qu'il y a un sens d'hockey très haut qui devrait être mieux dans la Ligue nationale que dans la Ligue américaine, j'ai entendu ça comme idée souvent. Je ne suis pas en désaccord, mais il y a tellement d'autres facteurs. Alors, on a vu 2 bons games de Lane contre Détroit, puis on va continuer à le suivre, puis prendre des décisions en fonction de qu'est-ce qu'on croit dans le bien-être de Lane Hutson. Je ne veux pas nécessairement cacher Lane Hutson, puis faire de lui un spécialiste d'avantages numériques. On veut faire de Lane Hutson le meilleur défenseur qui est capable de devenir. Si c'est en le faisant jouer en moins de minutes, mais dans la Ligue nationale, ou peut-être pas toutes les games, mais...
All right, okay. So I said to Kent Hughes, I said, Kent, sometimes when we talk about young players, I think we have to ask ourselves the question, is a player going to be better served in the National Hockey League than the American Hockey League? Because if a player has a certain hockey IQ and others in the American Hockey League don't have that IQ, he won't feed off of them. He'll probably end up performing better in the National Hockey League. And he said, I've heard that before. and I'm not opposed to that. But I'll tell you this. I'm not going to hide Lane Hutson. So I'm not going to put him on the Montreal Canadiens just so that I can play him a couple of minutes here and there. I'm going to do what's best for Lane Hutson and best for the Montreal Canadiens. If best for both is that Lane plays with the Canadiens and he plays only a few minutes or less minutes, okay. If best is that he plays in the American Hockey League and plays more minutes, okay. At the end of the day, I'm not going to hide him, and I'm going to do what will make Lane Hutson the best version of himself and the best defenseman that he can be. Now, he's not saying either way whether he starts in the National Hockey League or not, but what do you take out of that?
Well, I think that Kent is recognizing that the NHL is the highest level you can play at. You certainly, don't want to sit down and underestimate the challenges of a player, regardless of how good they are and what type of challenges they might go through as they're trying to find their way in the National Hockey League. So I think that Kent is looking at it. He'll let Lane dictate a lot of that. Lane's play dictate a lot of that. And I think that's important. I love the fact that Kent says we don't need to hide him. I've watched Lane Hutson for a long time. And I'll tell you what he's done since when he seriously became part of real top-notch competition. 16, 17, 18, 19. I'll tell you how his seasons went. Dominant. Like, again, he moved into the national team development program. Oh, wow, how size dominant. They had to get him up to the top team because they didn't have enough good players. Luke Hughes ended up getting hurt, and so they had to get Lane up there. Then the next year, dominant. Goes to BU, dominant at the World Junior. Dominant the next year at BU, dominant at the World Junior. Underestimate Lane Hutson at your peril. Let me repeat that. Underestimate Lane Hutson at your peril. Lane Hutson is a really good defensive player. He's a great mind on the ice. He generates things out of seemingly nothing. And to me, I have never seen him be overwhelmed. Ever. I would not be putting Lane Hutson onto my team to be the seventh defenseman to protect him.
Okay.
He doesn't need protecting.
Having said that, just to play devil's advocate here, because I absolutely love the kid. I'm the president of the fan club. As a matter of fact, I believe he's going to play in the National Hockey League this season, and I think he's going to be one of the nominees for the Calder Trophy. I think he's going to be in that conversation, all right? And this whole thing is taped, and everyone can look back at it, and they can say at the end of the year, Tony, you're a genius, or Tony, you're stupid. I'll be able to live with either, because I've been called both in my life. So now, let me play devil's advocate for a second here. You obviously saw him play those different levels, dominant. As you know, and I don't have to tell you this, the National Hockey League is a different beast. This is a different animal. And there are some who are worried about his ability to be able to win those battles in front of the net, to be able to win those battles for loose pucks, to be able to win those battles along the boards. Knowing Lane, knowing what he can do and what he cannot do, knowing it's going to be the National Hockey League, and knowing that, once again, this is a different animal, I will ask you right now, do you think right now he would be able to withstand the ability to defend at the National Hockey League level?
He's been a great defender for the last 4 years. Well, why is he going to be any less of a good defender now? Here's what you need, and I'm not underestimating the NHL. That's why Kent isn't saying one way or another. He's going to let Lane. Maybe Lane shows that he's not quite ready. That's okay. I'm not saying that he's automatic. I am just telling you that I am not going the other way just because he's a young player. Lane Hutson doesn't play the game on the opponent's terms. He forces opponents to play on his terms. He's magnificent the way he strips opponents with the puck. He's magnificent in the way that he positions himself to not get overwhelmed and to take advantage defensively. Let me be very clear here when I say I have never seen Lane Hutson overwhelmed defensively because he knows how to play defense.
Yeah.
Remember Peter Sabota? How big was Peter Sabota when he came into the league at 18?
No,
about 161 pounds.
Yeah.
And a great skater and everything. Peter didn't have a problem. And I'm not going to say that there's not going to be some developmental challenges with respect to the stages with Lane. I'm just telling you, Tony, all this talk that you've told me, never seen it.
Yeah.
He's been dominant.
No shoulders Svoboda, but then again, he was insulated by the great Larry Robinson too, though.
Do you not think that Marty St. Louis and the coaches, they got Caden Goalie, okay? They got David Savard. They got Michael Matheson. They're not making Lane Hutson their number one defenseman. They're not throwing him out there in situations where he's going to get overwhelmed and like where it's a little bit too much for him. So, again, I see based on what I've seen from Lane Hutson, I'm not betting against him ever.
All right. So then I said to Pierre, I said, look, Pierre, I understand. It actually makes sense. You can shave a few minutes off of Mike Matheson. You can give more minutes to other defensemen. You're not leaving a young defenseman out of the lineup. I understand the logic. Having said that, I said to Pierre, I said, look, Pierre, I don't know of too many teams that play 11 forward, 7 defensemen. Based on what I hear, the defensemen that don't like it because they get out of their rhythm. They like to go 3 duos. A coaching staff doesn't like it because you know what? It gets, it's easier for them to throw out 1, 2, 3, 4 and throw out the 3 duos of defense. So I'm not so sure I buy that. And he said, well, Tampa Bay's done it from time to time. It's worked out. And I said, yeah, but I just don't think it's going to happen here with the Canadiens. Traditionally, it's not an organization that does it very often. I think they did it back in the late 90s. Where Dave King, who was an assistant to Alain Vigneault, said, we're going to play Zarli Zalapski as almost a third defenseman. They went up against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they knocked them off in the first round. But I said to him, and then he came back to me, and he said, okay. He says, this is what they're going to do. This is what they should do. And then I thought it was a very interesting observation. He said, Leo Carlson. And the second he said it, I said, load management. And he said, that's right. Leo Carlson was a rookie last season with the Anaheim Ducks. I don't have to tell you that. He played 55 games. He played just over 18 minutes a game. He played 55 minutes a game. Yeah, I think he picked up 29 points. I think 9 of which were on the power play. I think he had a very good first rookie season for Leo Carlson, 29 points in 55 games. Not too many NHL teams have gone with load management. Of course, it's something that has existed a lot more in the sport of basketball. But I like the suggestion. I liked it. Does that make sense to you, load management?
Well, I mean, what's load management? Load management, I mean, the NBA is getting away from it. They have new rules that prevent you from being able to do this. I mean, how many players you can sit out or whatnot. So, because when you're going to a game to watch an NBA match and the players are playing, you know what? You're going to sit out a player. Now, what the Anaheim Ducks did was they didn't rob their home fans of Leo Carlson. They protected him on the road, protected him in back-to-backs. He had not been exposed to a lot of games, with the level of number of games in Sweden. And so they were transparent. They said about it. And to me, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, again, you might run into a period of time where you say, you know what, Lane's not getting enough ice time. We're going to send him down to Laval. I mean, they have that flexibility to do that. And when Pat Verbeek outlined what they were going to do with Leo, they did it with the agent. The other thing too with Leo was also the growth spurt that he had. He'd had a significant growth spurt. So being able to handle, like growing into his body, being able to handle the extra weight, being able to handle the demands, like I know that it's I guess what I would call a good idea, but everybody's different. And Lane, while you might look at it, and you try to protect players when they're young from being overwhelmed. And that can be physically, that can be the mental demands, like sometimes you need mental rest. Sometimes you need physical rest. So it's something that's there again for the coaches. And certainly with Leo Carlson, what the Anaheim Ducks did was something that was looking at it from a long-term perspective of Leo's development. And I don't think there's any doubt that Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens had the same idea with Lane and all their players.
Yeah. A shout out to Mantis Sleep. Use code SICKHABS for 10% off on your order at mantisleep.com. It's a mask designed for optimal sleep. It'll block out any light that's coming in while you're sleeping. It's adjustable. It's a personalized fit. You're going to find it very, very comfortable. Mantisleep.com. I think everyone should have a mask like that for when you go to bed. Use code SICKHABS and you get 10% off. Okay. Elliot Friedman who I've mentioned on more than one occasion, I think is absolutely fantastic at what he does. I think you would agree with that. I think he's one of the best in the business. He stated last week that after the San Jose Sharks acquired Askarov, that the Montreal Canadiens were one of the teams interested. That's what he heard. If Elliott says it, I believe it. Are you surprised to hear that the Canadiens were in on Askarov? A lot of people were expecting Caden Primo to get a chance here to finally show what he can do, maybe to try and become the next Samuel Montembeault, maybe better than that. So the duo is Montembeault and Primo. Were you at all surprised when you heard the Canadiens interested in Askarov?
Well, no, I'm never surprised, because the job of a team, of a management group, is to do whatever you can to improve the team. If you can do something that can improve the team, and every team is going to assess players differently and what their needs are differently. But Yaroslav Askarov has shown in the American Hockey League the last 2 years that he's bona fide. And that's my assessment of him. I think he's a bona fide NHL goaltender. Now, the situation in Nashville changed. They drafted him 11th overall, but then they signed Hugh Saros to the long-term contract. And now they have a situation that Askarov isn't necessarily the happiest camper, and Barry Trotz recognized it and moved along. But when you have an opportunity and you hear about a player that you rate highly, you get in there and hear about it, express your interest. I don't know how close a team is. All I know is that the San Jose Sharks were the ones that were able to affect the deal. But the managers are always phoning around when they hear about a potential player being available, and especially when it's a higher end player. You're making that call. What are you thinking? Do we have anything that might interest you? What would be the plan? But it all goes back to their own assessments. So I believe Askarov's a really good goaltender. I would be surprised if teams weren't interested in him, because I think he projects as a bona fide number one goalie.
Craig, based on what we're reading and what we're hearing around the league, it is believed that Owen Beck was the asking price, and the Canadiens said, we're not willing to do that. The 20-year-old 6-foot centerman who was drafted 33rd overall back in 2022, who played the last season OHL started with Peterborough and ended with Saginaw, 51 points in 32 games for Saginaw, and 14 points in 17 games in the playoffs. I'm going to ask you right now, would you have given up Owen Beck for Askarov?
Well, let me evaluate the deal, and look at who the Nashville Predators got. They got David Edstrom. David Edstrom was the 32nd pick in the draft by the Vegas Golden Knights. I think he's going to be a third-line center, a really good one. I think Owen Beck projects as a really good 2B, 3A center. And, a third-line center is really valuable. And if he ends up being a second line, great. That's awesome. But I think Owen Beck will be able to play in the NHL. Now, here's where I'm at. As much as I like Askarov, and I'm an Askarov fan, I would not have traded Owen Beck for Askarov because I have Jacob Fowler.
Who's how many years away?
2 at least. And I'm talking about playing. I'm not talking about turning pro. I'm talking about coming in and playing.
So you obviously feel that Askarov in the next 2 years wouldn't be that much of a difference maker and it'd be worthwhile waiting on Fowler, or you're just thinking if you already have an asset in goal, why would you want to give up an asset like Owen Beck? What's the thinking here?
Samuel Montembeault has had a really good progression in his game. Mike Johnson, who is terrific in the work that he does, feels that Samuel Montembeault should be a candidate for should be in the conversation to be a candidate for Team Canada. The year before he went and played at the World Championships, acquitted himself exceptionally well. This year he didn't go, he passed on it. But Samuel Montembeault, and then the Montreal Canadiens sign him to a longer term contract. You end up trading Jake Allen because you believe in Caden Primo. And again, I think that Askarov is a really good goaltender, but you've committed to Montembeault. You've committed, now you got to offload other players, and you have Jacob Fowler, and now where you're at, so Jacob Fowler, what ends up happening? What happens if Jacob Fowler goes, well, you just traded for Askarov. I'm not going to play for you, right?
I
So,
hear
and the contracts come into play, and looking at the difference that a player like Askarov's going to have growing pains playing full time in the NHL. I'm not saying he's coming in there clean, and I don't think the Montreal Canadiens right now are looking to have a goaltender go through growing pains.
Difficult.
So that's why I would say no at this point in time.
Got it. Difficult question, but you're a big boy, so I'm going to ask it anyway because I know you can take it. In your opinion, who's got a higher ceiling, Askarov or Fowler?
Fowler's got a little bit more technical acumen to his game at this point in time. He's a really good athlete. Askarov has got tremendous athleticism. I think Yaroslav has to get the technical part of his game a little bit more in order. But if he does, I think Askarov would have the higher ceiling. But if he doesn't, that's an area that Askarov has to find. Do I think it's teachable? Yeah. Do I think he can develop it? Yeah. But we've seen goaltenders that I thought in the past could do that too, and they weren't able to do it. So that's it. Whereas I already see Jacob, and Jacob's a good athlete, but he's also very, very strong foundation of technical ability.
I don't know if too many people who have said the Montreal Canadiens are going to make the playoffs this season who have predicted that or have that opinion. Steve Bégin, former Hab, has already come out and said, you know what, with the acquisitions the Canadiens have, with adding Patrick Laine, with Kirby Dach healthy, he believes the Canadiens are good for 10 more wins and they'll make the playoffs. Pierre Maguire, I was on with him yesterday, and he was talking about, I think Tampa is going to make the playoffs. I think Boston's going to make the playoffs. I think Toronto's going to make the playoffs. I think Florida's going to make the playoffs. He was basically trying to say it would be very, very difficult for the Montreal Canadiens to make the playoffs. I've asked you this question already in the last month or so, and you said, no, forget it. They're not going to make the playoffs, and you don't expect them to be close. But you know what? I asked Kent Hughes yesterday on BPM Sports Radio, and I said to him, the last several years you haven't made the playoffs, and I totally understand it. It's a byproduct. It's a consequence of a rebuild. If you don't make the playoffs this year for the first time, will you say it's a failure? Because I don't believe the last 3 years have been a failure because it's a consequence of the rebuild. I was just hoping the answer that he would give me would tell me whether or not he still thinks that they're in a rebuild or not, right? This is what he had to say.
On a parlé d'être dans le mix, Tony. On n'a pas fixé un objectif qu'on faut absolument faire les séries. On a fixé un objectif de continuer. Les objectifs, au moins du côté de l'équipe de gestion, étaient d'améliorer l'offensif.
All right. He says we didn't have the objective. We don't have the objective that we have to make the playoffs. Our objective is that we want to be in the mix. We want to play some significant games in March. And to get there, the number one priority was to improve the offense. Your thoughts on what do you have to say?
Yeah, I totally agree with Kent. I said it last week. I mean, I believe they were 26 in goals for, 27th on the power play. Their goals against wasn't very good. Their defensive metrics. So they got to improve. And I mean, they were the 28th team in the league. 28th. That's where they finished. 28th is now you got to get to the top 16. That's a huge jump when you're looking at your competition. Could it happen? Yeah, if everything absolutely went right and you could do it. But the fact of the matter is, if you, and I said this last week when we were talking, is that if you can play games against teams that are really grinding, that are pushing their level of competitiveness higher, their intensity higher, and your players can see what that is, I think that's really important. I think that's really important for the growth of the group, and certainly something that would benefit them. Stevie Bégin, you may not know this, Stevie Bégin is one of my favorite players all time, one of my favorite people all time. When I say I love Stevie Bégin, I love him. And I watched Stevie Bégin help our farm team in St. John, the Flames. He was the American Hockey League playoff MVP that year. I had tears in my eyes because I said to myself, the most valuable player was Steve Bégin. And when they announced him as the most valuable player, I said, boy, did they ever get that right. So Steve Bégin, if he was playing for the Montreal Canadiens, his will and his determination were second to none. And you got to give, I give Stevie a little bit of credit, seeing things that maybe the others don't see, and that willingness to just do whatever it takes to help you do that. So, you got Pierre on one side, me on one side, Stevie on the other. Stevie was a great, great competitor. And like I said, one of my favorites.
I never told him this, but in all my years of covering hockey and being in locker rooms, doing some reporting duties and stuff like that, Steve Bégin was one of my favorite players ever to cover, because he actually, this is kind of weird, but he seemed like a normal guy. Like, he didn't seem like a hockey player, and he was a good hockey player, and he was a heart and soul guy. But like, I know good when I meet it. That's a good man right there. That's a good man.
Oh, he is. He's terrific. I have a picture of Stevie with the Calder Cup and his most valuable player trophy, and I'm in the picture with him. And it's one of my prized possessions, because Stevie had his nose broken. He's got black eyes and everything. And you watch what he did. It was just phenomenal. And when you watch players that are so invested in doing whatever it takes to help the team win, and willing to sacrifice it at levels that really, until you push yourself there, you're not sure if you even can get there. But Stevie not only pushed himself there, he pushed an entire group of players there. Just absolutely phenomenal.
We're going to end with this. I said to Kent Hughes, I said, Kent, there's probably 20 things I can throw at you in terms of these 20 things need to happen for your team to make the playoffs. But I'm going to narrow it down to the 3 that I think are probably the most important. He said, okay. I said, in no particular order. Your power play has to be in the top 15 in the league. You have to be healthy, something you haven't been in the last 3 years. And Montembeault and Primo have to have their best seasons of their careers. And I said, I want you to answer the question, but you can't give me one of those 3 answers. Give me another one.
Okay.
And I'd like to have your answer, and then I'm going to tell you what Kent Hughes' answer was.
Well, so I'm just going to comment on a couple of things. Health is always going to be key to any team, being able to perform to the best of their abilities and to their potential, whatever that may be. Samuel Montembeault, Jake Allen, and let me just say, the goaltending last year for the Montreal Canadiens was very solid. And so, the power play, if it can be better, we talked about the scoring. Their defensive play has to be a lot better. I don't think until that, like, that's why I say penalty killing, power play, defensive play, offensive play. They're in the bottom 5, 6, 7 teams in the league. That doesn't get you there. So it's great that even if you take your power play up to 15, your defensive play has to be better, and your penalty killing has to be better with it. Ray Ferraro, my dear friend, and I buy into this 100%. If my power play isn't performing, that means I'm not scoring. But when my penalty killing isn't performing, that means we're getting scored upon, and we got to go find goals. The Montreal Canadiens have to improve their defensive play and their penalty killing for them to be in the playoffs.
Well, I think Kent Hughes gave an answer that is kind of that, because he answered it by saying this. Jeff Gordon has always told me that if you want to have a successful season, your special teams have to total 100 or more. And there in line goes the power play and the penalty kill. So that was his way of answering it. I think his answer was very good. I think your answer was very good. I think this was a great conversation, my friend.
Thank you very much, Tony. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. You have a great night. There you have it.
Too.
TSN hockey analyst and director of scouting, Craig Button Marinaro. If you like the show tonight, if you like the podcast, like it, comment sick, share it with your friends. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. For Shane Gaumont and Master Control, the sick is in. I'm Marinaro. Boom!
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaBita.tb, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.